Podcast.
I'm Mikey Dobbs.
And I'm Carmen Butler.
And this is
The ATL On Fire Podcast Show.
So you want to start with the starting lineup?
I think so, yeah. So we know that Sosa is certainly out because he's suspended for 2 games. So we can just take him out of the equation. What do you think from all the lead up here? What are your thoughts on who we're going to start?
It seems like the back line is set, right? Guzan is going to be in goal.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any chance. You know, it's interesting because he didn't play on Wednesday night, but him and Miles Robinson were clearly rested after a long preseason, and they both started in St. Louis. That was as close to the starting lineup as you might expect to see next Saturday, with the exception that the new guys are still in play for a potential starting lineup. But I think the back is all set. It's going to be Guzan in goal. It's going to be Gutman at left back. It's going to be Robinson and Parata in the center, and it's going to be Lennon on the right.
Okay.
That's clear.
So without Sosa, who's going to play that kind of pivotal role in front of the back four?
Can we go with nobody?
Yeah, but who is it going to be?
Well, it's going to be Josetu, but he doesn't really play that.
Yeah. I think it has to be, right? And then
Josetu and Ibarra. We haven't seen any Sejdic all preseason long, so presumably he's got an injury. We haven't heard anything from Atlanta United about it, but he obviously is not going to start if he hasn't played any preseason.
I will say that gives me a little comfort. It's not his position, though, but at least he's a seasoned player. He's got lots of minutes, so hopefully he can figure out a way to mentally.
Josetu, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, Josetu to figure out, stay a little more defensive minded. I don't know though. What do you think?
Well, considering that was the center midfield that got run over in preseason in a bunch of games, including in Chattanooga.
Yeah. And he's also said Pineda that he wants Josetu to be more aggressive, right? So he should be on the other side of this equation.
Yeah, well, we'll get to it at the end of the podcast.
So is it Ibarra that's going to be back there in the Sosa position? I think it is.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe you could call it a double pivot, but he sees Josetu as a defensive midfielder, right? So
I don't think so.
Ibarra has been further forward than Josetu for the most part in the preseason.
That doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound right to me either. Because, you need a guy who can get in a tackle, right? And Ibarra is willing to break a guy in half, Carmen, what do you think about our midfield situation?
It seems in flux at best. I keep trying to wish Sosa back somehow, and then he
will be back after 2 games. But one of the things that's interesting, and I think this is the moment to pause and talk about it, right? We mentioned it on an earlier podcast, but I think let's hit it home again, right? So Sosa is obviously not available for the first 2 games, right? But he hasn't played at all in the preseason. He was an emergency starter in Chattanooga, and after the game, Pineda said that he was called into at the last second because of a last-minute injury to the starting lineup, right? There's 3 possibilities. One possibility is that Sosa is nowhere in the equation. He's not even considered a starter, which seems to me nuts.
Yeah.
Right? Second possibility is that he says because he's not ready for the first 2 games, that he's not going to play in preseason basically at all. Or the third possibility is that Sosa picked up a knock in that game, and that's why he hasn't been available the rest of the preseason. What do you think?
I think it's the second to last one there, which is that he just is not starting him because he knows he's on suspension the first 2 games and wants to go with who he thinks needs to be ready on day 1.
What do you think, Carmen? Do you agree?
I'm over here trying to make sure that Elliot can hear us, so I haven't really been what you were saying.
Are we having audio problems?
It sounds like we might be having some audio problems. Elliot says he can't hear, so I'm working on it. But y'all just keep going.
Man. So I hate it when this is our second live disaster.
Disaster is strong.
Yeah, that's a strong word, Mikey.
It is. It's like when you go live and there's no audio, that's a disaster. I think that Sosa's got to be our starter, and I think Pineda thinks the same.
But if that's the case, are you okay with him getting basically no minutes in preseason. Because he wasn't even on the bench against Toluca. He wasn't even on the bench in St. Louis.
No, I think we talked about this on the last podcast. It's like I agreed with you after disagreeing with you that I thought you should play the starters to get ready for game one. But you're right. I think you should establish the system first so that everybody else kind of knows, here's how Sosa plays. I need to fill in and play
It's
in
almost
the
like
way that the coaches designed it.
it's almost like it's a punishment, right? Like that, I mean, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe the Atlanta United club decided that, because he was supposedly using a racial slur that, which he claims that he didn't know was actually a racial slur or whatever, but that they were like, look, not only are you suspended, but you are person non grata until the suspension is over.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
but in that case, then in the emergency, he played him in Chattanooga, and he played right through that.
Right.
And he said, and maybe that was so weird because he said, that we only did that because of an emergency, and maybe that's sort of indicative that he was like, just so you know. But if that's the case, if he really is suspended, you can't go with it no matter what. You got to find somebody else.
yeah.
Right.
Right? It doesn't make sense at all.
So is Etienne going to be available on the left to start?
So Etienne finally made his Atlanta United debut at St. Louis, but off the bench. I would presume that he is available, but with the minutes that he's gotten in preseason, you got to imagine that it's unlikely that he would be starting. Now, this is okay because obviously Caleb Wiley is a very capable, fill-in, if you will. Maybe even Caleb Wiley's the starter. I don't know.
And you're totally confident that Abram is not going to get the start. It's going to be Peralta.
I don't think so. I mean, Abram also did make his debut. His visa came through, so he played in St. Louis. You're not allowed to play until you have your visa, so he did show up as a sub off the bench. I would have a hard time saying that you're going to go with a guy who's played 30 minutes or so in preseason as the starter.
Agreed. I think Peralta is the right choice there. So
especially when you have such a logical backup. Now, up front, where we have no options, you might see Giacomakis or Papa Giorgio starting despite the fact that he has not played a minute. Now, his visa is not yet through. The rumor is that it's coming through tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think given what our other options are, you play your talent. And that guy.
Now, he's been training.
Yeah.
He's allowed to train, so it's not like he'd be brand new to the squad.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he has not played a minute of preseason.
Now, I'm still going to go with that Ibarra has to be the Sosa fill and Josetu has to be more offensive.
Well,
I think that's
I'm not
what
disagree with you, but.
And then, of course, we've got Almada as the other attacking center mid, and then whether it's Wiley or Etienne.
Yeah, so Almada is the lock-in as the attacking midfield, and Araujo is the lock as the front of three.
Sure.
For sure.
Now,
so let's just recap it real quick. So I think the starting lineup is Guzan in goal, right? I think it's Gutman on the left. It's Peralta and Robinson at center back. It's Lennon on the right. It's Ibarra, Josetu sitting behind at some level, Almada. On the left, it's either Wiley or Etienne. I think it's going to be Wiley with Etienne coming off the bench. Up top, if Giacomakis comes through, would be the starter. If not, he was going with Machop Chol, but he is now slight injured with the hamstring, and so you got to figure it's Jackson Conway starting in the first game. And outright is Araujo.
Yeah, I would agree. And we have signed another backup striker from DC United, right?
Yes. I have to call up his name.
Miguel Berry, is that something right?
I have it. Hold on a second. It's Miguel Berry. That is correct. An MLS veteran. He played last with DC, 14 games and
0 goals.
0 goals.
But let's also know DC United was a dumpster fire last year. So could be part of that because you were saying he scored at previous clubs, right?
Yes, he played in the MLS previously for Columbus. He had 10 goals in 35 games for them. So that, as a backup, is not too shabby.
Yeah.
But then they released him.
Well, one thing I'd like, if you look at someone like a Brandon Vasquez, and you judged him on his numbers from his first year or two at Atlanta United, I don't know. Is he one of those players? I have no idea. How old is this kid? Or is he past? Is he past that?
No, he's still young.
Still developing. Okay.
Yeah. I don't have his age.
Because you assume you assume they're betting on the up there, that he's got some talent, but it also shows that maybe they don't believe so much in Jackson Conway.
He scored a few goals for San Diego when he was on a loan there in the USL.
Yeah. He's 25.
25.
He's still a kid.
How old is Jackson Conway though? Somewhere around the same age, right?
He's a little like 23.
Yeah.
A little younger, but a little summer. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, it doesn't tell you that they have a lot of confidence in Jackson Conway. That's for sure. Why sign a guy this late? I mean, unless they're thinking like this guy, their scouting says, he's got real potential, and you just take a flyer on him.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, certainly we're desperate for striker options, because even if Giakoumakis is, fully available and ready to go, right now he was grooming Machop Chol to be the backup who's never played striker in his entire life. And Jackson Conway's the other backup. None of that inspires confidence.